Hey everybody, welcome to The Wrap. We are in episode 67 today.
Good, because we got away from 66.
We
so
did.
kinda,
That was kind of a weird
last time.
Yeah, and we actually have a topic to talk about this week.
Well, yes, we do.
Yeah.
I mean, we did fine last week.
We did fine
last week.
It
flowed great
Yeah.
last week. We talked about some really important stuff last week, but back on the path, if you will, for this week.
We're back on that
our
Bible engagement.
journey, Bible engagement
path,
moving through the New Testament and specifically right now the Gospels. And today we get to talk about a really, really popular, well-known story.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the more well-known parables.
Yeah, I don't ever want to assume. I think that a lot of times we do that, don't we, right? It's like, oh, everybody knows the story of the lost son.
Yeah.
But the reason very much we are doing this whole Bible journey, Bible engagement, is that by and large, not just society as a whole, but definitely society as a whole has lost its knowledge of the Bible like it used to have.
Yeah,
to
Bible
some
literacy
degree.
is not.
But I would say Bible literacy is just as bad in the church.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, I just heard a story here the other day that somebody had asked, "Can you please tell me the story of Jesus and the woman of the well in John 4?" I mean, that's a pretty familiar story. I mean, like that literally should be one you can walk through. And what's the point of this story? And someone who was a seasoned vet of the church was like fumbling through it, you know. So, which is, you know, at the same time, doesn't it sometimes, or like the story gets stuck in here, but it never,
That's how I feel like sometimes when you're like, what was the next thing he said?
I don't know. I know it in here, but it just won't come out of my mouth right now.
It's a very biblical thing.
Very biblical. So, you know, as much as we say the story of the prodigal, or sometimes it's called, I think a better title for it is the lost son, and we'll talk about why.
Or the wayward son, or the rebellious son. There's a lot of different.
Everybody knows what we're talking about when we talk about that.
We say prodigal, and sometimes people are like, "What's that mean?"
What's prodigal mean? Lost.
Yeah.
You know, lost, wayward, reckless, all those things. So regardless, I think that we shouldn't probably assume, oh, everybody knows this story. But it is a fairly popular, common, and the reason I like it is A, it's very straightforward, and it's very, ready for this word, applicable.
Yes, I like that.
Right, it's readily applied to anybody's life.
Right.
And many times when Jesus does this and he teaches a parable, which is what this is, it's not necessarily the only thing to do with a parable, and sometimes it's the wrong thing to do with a parable, is where do I find myself in this story? Yeah. And again, be very careful with that. Don't always try to import
don't
yourself.
Don't insert yourself in the story.
Like, don't
you're
insert
not
yourself
to be
there. Or here's what I would usually say. I think that we do insert ourselves at some point of the story and find whose attitudes and actions match ours currently. But what we usually do is we insert ourselves into the wrong spot of the story.
Yeah.
Case in point, David and Goliath, right? Like, I mean, if Prodigal Son is one of the stories that are well known, David and Goliath.
Yeah.
I mean, even businesses use the whole illustration of the David and Goliath, the underdog versus the giant. And usually when it comes to that story, we look around it and we say, who are we in the story? And inevitably, who do we find ourselves and put ourselves...
David, of course.
Right?
I don't think anybody would identify as the giant.
I want to meet the person who does that. Like, that's me. I'm Goliath.
That's me. I'm going down.
So, yes, we always self-identify with David.
Yeah.
That's not the point of the story. You are not David.
Yeah.
In the story, who is David? And for us, in a modern sense, on this side of the cross, who is David?
Jesus.
Jesus is David.
Yeah.
David is only ever meant to, and again, this is what's so important about the Bible. We've said this a number of times.
If we want to insert ourselves, we're more like the people of Israel sitting there cowering.
Yeah, exactly, right? We are. In that situation, we're the cowardly Israelites on the sideline going, we ain't going out there. We ain't touching that. So, by the way, that's a great point there. Let me just, as an aside, okay, breaking the third wall, I think is what they call this, and looking at the camera. Anytime in Scripture when you're needing to find yourself in the story, this is a very painful admission, but look for the most unlovable, cowardly, messy person in the story, and that's probably us.
Yeah.
So in that situation, yes, we are the ones on the sidelines.
In the parable of the prodigal son.
Look at that. He brings us back. He snaps us back to, he's like, Ryan, we got to get back to the point here.
We have two options, actually. That we could be in the story.
Yeah, two and two only.
We could be
because you are not
the wayward son.
But by the way, can I just stop before you say that and where you're going? Because you snapped us back here. I feel like even we do this with this story, we're like, well, we should be like the Father. We should just offer unending, unlimited, great. Like, no. Do you not see who the Father and only who the Father can be in this story? Yeah. It can only be.
Jesus even made it easy. Like, the Father is the Father.
The Father. The Father is the Father.
Yeah, the story is about the Father.
And what Jesus is about to do in his life.
That parable is more about the Father's love than it is the wayward son.
Now, is it right for us to walk away from that story and be like, we should demonstrate grace in our lives? This is another, one of a million that Jesus teaches on.
But that would be identifying as the second son. We'll get to that here in a second.
Yes, we'll talk about all those things. But, like, should we not have grace? Again, like a million stories that Jesus teaches, and really a lot of them point back to this concept of, can we forgive?
Yeah.
Can we show grace because we have been shown grace? So, again,
we're getting there.
You're not the Father.
Yeah, right. But we're not getting there because you are not the Father.
You are not the Father.
This is not Mari. You are not the Father.
Luke, I am your Father. Okay, sorry.
No, and I think that is that's the whole impetus behind that parable, because we often forget who he was talking to when he was given that parable.
Yeah, that's very important too.
Is that he was talking to...
We're talking about a lot of big things today. Yeah. Context.
He was...
audience.
Context is everything. He was talking to the Pharisees and Sadducees who were not loving towards people who were lost. And saying, look, the Father's heart...
He did that a lot, didn't he?
Oh, he did. He did. He railed on those Pharisees
because
and Sadducees.
If I'm correct in remembering right, what precedes Jesus leading into this parable of the lost son? It's because Pharisees and Sadducees that looked at their disciples and do what?
Yeah, they're eating with sinners and tax collectors.
Those are the wrong people.
They're hanging out with the wrong crowd.
The wrong people to be hanging out with. And so that leads Jesus to teach on 3 parables about lostness.
Right. And, setting up the fact that, he uses the lost sheep and the lost coin, which were symbols of wealth for them. That they were
or value. Something that was of value.
And so Jesus is saying, look, to God, these lost people are valuable. Yeah. And they should be to you.
Well, I think that's really the overall tenor of all 3 of these parables and the lost son that we're going to talk deeply about, is that lost things, and specifically for us, lost people matter greatly.
I love how Jesus, his teachings always circled it right back around and put it right back in their laps. He starts with this, they're valuable, they mean something to God, and he ends with the older son and the father saying, look, you should come in and party because your brother who was lost is now found. Yeah. Who was dead is now alive. Yeah. Come in and celebrate.
And what's the older brother sit there?
He says, no, I'm not doing it.
Let's take a step back for just a moment and talk about one of these earlier parables before the lost son. Yeah. Now, they kind of laughed at me in Bible study on Sunday as I talked about this. They laugh at me and make fun of me when I come up with things. So we were talking about the parable of the lost sheep. That Jesus or the shepherd would leave the 99 to go after the one, which shows up again in the story of the lost son. Yeah. We'll try to bring those things together. But I brought this image up because what would happen oftentimes, and what even happens today in a pastoral and a shepherd society or kind of lifestyle, is that as a sheep herder, if a sheep wanders off, you go and seek them out, because sheep are stupid and they'll just get completely lost. But do you know what would happen, what a shepherd would do when they found a sheep that had wandered off and gotten off the right path? It's not very pretty. It's very graphic. Oftentimes, we would think, oh, well, he beat the sheep, beat them senseless so that they would learn a lesson. It was even beyond that. They would oftentimes break the legs of the sheep and have to carry the sheep on its shoulders. So again, think about Jesus telling this parable. He'll go out and find the one sheep, and he'll carry it home on its shoulders. And then we apply that to the story of the parable of the lost son. And they were laughing at me. They're like, yeah, that's a pretty graphic picture. And we came up with, we said, all we're going to think about in the sermon today is, Wade said, breaky. But don't you feel like, as much as they laugh about it, we're like, oh, that's not a really great picture to think of. Because we usually come to these parables and we think about joyfulness and
Yeah.
like, I've brought home the sheep. I've found the coin. We always
Found him.
celebrate.
Little buddy,
joy.
go be with your.
But we don't think behind it that there's some discipline and some consequences that need to come as a result of our bad and poor decisions and actions. And it shows up in the story of the parable of the lost son. Now, we usually get the father's at home, and you were right. I love how you said it too, that as this younger son goes away and he squanders all of his father's inheritance. That, by the way, you were very correct. He basically says, "Dad, I want you to be dead."
Yeah. I want what is coming to me when you're dead now.
Yeah, I want it now. So just die. You're dead to me. Basically, is what he's saying. He squanders all of this, and you're saying he's sitting here in the pig pen, if you will, and he's rehearsing this in his mind. Even my dad's servants are living better than I am. If I go back and I just offer myself to him, I'm not worthy to be your son, just take me on as a servant. And you're right, he probably just sat there and rehearsed that. He's going down the road to his house, he's getting closer to his house, he's saying, okay, this is what I've got to say, you've got to say. What we often don't think of is probably the father every single day is rehearsing his mind. What am I going to do if my son comes home?
Yeah.
Am I going to berate him?
Because you can tell, just the way Jesus portrays that image of, he knew exactly what he was going to do.
Exactly, because he had rehearsed that over and over his mind. I'm prepared to know what I'm going to do I think he even said to himself, it's not if my son comes home, when my son comes home.
Or he would have never been watching.
Yep, this is what's going to happen, and this is how I'm going to react. Now, again, taking that image of a shepherd having to break the legs of a sheep to make sure that it doesn't wander off anymore. Usually what we get is we see this dad, and he very really has compassion and love and forgiveness and grace on his son, runs out to meet him. Son didn't even have a chance to say the lines that he's rehearsed for so long. And we say, oh, isn't that just a beautiful picture of like just, I'll love you no matter what. Isn't there really, though, and truly the sense of this younger son having his legs broken?
Because when he comes back, he's broken.
He's got nothing. He is
the
in
bottom.
the pig pen, the lowest of the low for a person in Jewish society, to be around pigs and to have nothing to eat but the slop. And even he really didn't have that.
Yeah, because they wouldn't give that to him.
So here's the deal that I think in life sometimes, because people usually go the opposite way, like, oh, so people are supposed to just get off scot-free and not experience anything for the poor decisions they made. And be like, guess what? Life has a pretty good job of breaking legs, doesn't it? Dad didn't have to do that. I think we apply this to ourselves, and this is what you were saying, like, we are not the Father, but we take the grace and the love and the mercy of the Father and apply it in our lives. We don't have to break people's legs.
Yeah.
Life does enough of that. And guess what? The justice and the wrath and the rightness of God takes care of those things.
Well, I think we're often like the older son in the church, and we often feel like people should pay penance before they come to Christ.
And guess what?
Christ, or God, you don't know what they've done.
And usually they can't pay enough penance. Nothing you do is ever going to make up for what you've done. I heard it said this way, and this is bringing in an illustration for what we're going to talk about next time and what I've been working on this week and talking about Jesus washing the disciples' feet. I heard this illustration that generally, so if I were to wash your feet, and I'm not going to wash your feet, so sorry. What temperature do you want that water to be at?
Warm.
Like a nice bath, warm bath water. So usually in the church we have people, and again, this is applying this to the older son in this story. We have people that are either washing feet with ice cold water. They're bitter. They're detached. They're unloving. They're distant. I love you, but
You're splashing it on.
Yeah, people are splashing. Or we have people who are washing water with scalding hot water. That I'm going to make you pay for what you've done. And so I think the illustration is with this older son is like, what kind of reaction are you going to have? What kind of love are you going to show? Are you going to make them have to earn it forever and they're never really going to earn it? Or are you just going to be cold and indifferent and distant to them? So that's what do you think when you look at the story of younger son comes back, dad says, my son is home, kill the fattened calf, bring out the best, we're having a party. And the older, imagine it, by the way, that the older son has no knowledge of this, and he comes home and he's like, what, did I miss an invitation to a party? Oh, your brother, he's back home. Oh, you mean that rat that decided he was going to slink away and take all of your money? He's back, and now we're throwing a party? This seems really, really weird. Apply this. what temperature do you see the older brother displaying towards?
Some scalding hot
Oh,
water. Yeah.
stink is he ever?
Yeah.
He is like, I'm gonna burn you.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, scalding hot.
The
water.
refusal to come in.
Yeah,
you
just
know,
like a impetuous little child out there, arms
Yeah.
crossed and like, you
Yeah.
can't make me go in.
Yeah.
And can you imagine? So I believe it breaks a father's heart to see his youngest son essentially look at him and say, I want you to die, Dad, because I want your money. Do you know what, though? I think it broke his heart just as much, if not more, to see his older son.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and something that we don't readily see, that I think they would have, at the time Jesus actually gave the parable, is the older son, because he was the older son, got a double portion of the inheritance. So his whole, well, you never did anything for me.
Not only that, but think about that.
And
If
the
he
father
gets
says, everything I have is yours. Like,
yeah, because he's already taken everything. A double portion of the blessing, what does it mean when the son, I think sometimes we think that, like he came up, Dad, I want your money. It really didn't cost the older son anything, because he was still going to get his double blessing.
Right.
The younger son just simply got the portion that would have been coming to him anyways.
Yeah.
So he really loses out on nothing in this.
Yeah.
But what is it in his attitude that is so infuriating and so smarmy? This older brother. I mean, what do you see in it that connects with the way that we sometimes have our attitudes today? What do you see in that older brother?
An attitude of, well, he doesn't deserve your forgiveness.
So there's definitely a very judgmental spirit, a very bitter spirit, a very, say it this way, I'm better than you.
Yeah.
Because I was the good little boy, and I didn't run away, and I did everything you've asked me to. And guess what? By the way, I believe the older brother displayed in his life what I often call checkmark living. He was doing the right thing, but he was doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Oh, Dad, I took care of the animals. Dad, I stayed here with you while the younger brother.
I can see it too. And I took his job on when he left the family farm.
Yeah.
Right. Like
I assumed all his responsibility. Check.
Yeah.
And I think what really gets revealed at the end of this, right, is that we don't have just one lost son in the story, do we?
Yeah.
Both of the sons are lost in their own ways.
Yeah.
Like, can I give a great resource?
Yeah.
We
like resources. Yeah.
In the show notes, you really need to check out, and this is what really turned my entire thinking around about this whole story. I read it wrong for so long in my life. Go check out Tim Keller's resource, The Prodigal God. You can find that link in the show notes. You guys can find it there. It's a book, but it's also a study as well too. I would encourage you read the book, but also get the study too and walk through it yourself as he talks about what we often miss in this story. And that's one of the things that really just shocked me is, like, we always look at the younger brother and we're like, he is so lost.
Yeah.
The older brother is just as lost.
Yeah.
It's basically two different ways of loving the Father, and in our situation, loving God. Either we want nothing to do with him, we just want all the good stuff from him, or like the older brother, we are close to him, but we're not really connected to him.
We know all the right things.
We know all the right things to do to be around God and feel like we're pleasing God, but we don't love God.
Yeah. Well, and he was talking to the Sadducees and Pharisees, which I believe the older son was them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, look, you're doing all the right things.
Which, by the way, let me interject here a little bit. If you want to find yourself in the story, you're often not the younger son, you are the older son.
Yeah.
Yes, and you're right.
Yeah.
He's talking to religious leaders who don't exhibit any...
They know the law front and back.
But they have no love.
But they have no... Yeah.
Have no
grace,
substance.
They're just... They're what would Jesus say? They're whitewashed tombs.
Yes. There's no substance
to
the outward. They have a great outward appearance, but there's no substance to who they are because they lack love, which, by the way, really oddly enough, next week we talk about that very thing, this whole theme of love. If we don't have love, it's empty, it's hollow, it means nothing. And so I think we come to the end of the story and we see that they're both lost. They're just lost in their own way. And I would argue, honestly, that the lostness of the older brother is much more dangerous than the lostness of the younger brother.
Because you don't see it.
Yeah.
He's lost without a contrite heart.
Yes.
He's lost without the brokenness.
I've heard it said this way, and I heard this really great line. I was like, where am I going to be able to use this? And it's going to be right here. This is a really scary thing and a very, very serious thing as well, too, is if you choose to disbelieve God and who Jesus is, there will come a time when you can't believe the things of God and who Jesus is, because you'll become so hard and numb and distant. And I believe that's where this older brother finds himself. Is he is so calloused and so hardened, he is so numb to everything around him that he can't feel anymore. That he can't possibly rejoice because his brother has come home, which, by the way, is another part of the story that we often forget about, is as the older brother, what was his responsibility? What should his responsibility have been in that situation? He should have been responsible for going and getting his younger brother and talking some sense into him. Yeah. But he is so self-righteous and he is so lost. Yeah. And he lacks any sort of a servant and a loving heart, that he has no ability to even go to his brother. Yeah. Like that's your job, older brother. That's what you should have done in this situation, and you missed it. Yeah. And again, I think this is what Jesus is saying all throughout his ministry to the religious leaders. Yeah.
Here's what you should have been
doing.
You
know the scriptures. I mean, he even says this at one point. You know the scriptures, like inside, outside, backwards, upside down, and yet you still miss me. And yet you still miss the key and the essence and the point of why I'm here. Which again brings it all the way right from the beginning. Why in the world is your teacher eating with such scum? Yeah. And I believe Jesus has a little sigh on the inside. He says, they're still missing this, aren't they? And the sad part of it is, I'm just going to speak for me. I'm going to speak for Ryan, but I think it applies to a lot of us. We're still missing it, aren't we? Yeah. Like I've been preparing this sermon on John 13 and Jesus washing the disciples' feet, and it's hit me in a new way. And I thought this the other day. Don't you read stories over and over again like John 13 that you've read about the Last Supper and Jesus washing the disciples' feet? And doesn't it just sometimes depend on where you are in your life and the maturity level of your life of how something finally gets to you, and you're just like, oh my land, yeah, I've missed this. I've missed this in my entire life. We lack the love, the compassion, the grace. You know, we're close to Jesus, but we're not connected to Jesus. Right. We don't really know Jesus. And I think that we just need to kind of ask ourselves that. And that's a great question to ask off of this story of the lost sons. I'm going to pluralize it there. They're both lost. Is where's your heart? Are you still struggling? And you may be a person who like, hey, I've known Jesus for 25 years of my life. Have you really? I just think we have to come every day and be like, do I know Jesus like I need to know Jesus? Not just be close to Jesus or know about Jesus, but know Jesus and know his love and his grace and his mercy and his justice and his wrath and all the character traits of Jesus. Do I really know all about that, or am I missing it? Yeah. Because guess what? Like that exhibit A, the best case you can give is the religious leaders. They had their scripture down. Yeah. They had all of the traditions down. They had all of the right things to do down, but they were doing it in the wrong way and for the wrong reason and with the wrong motive. Yeah. And we just got to check ourselves at the door every single day, I'm convinced. You know, it's not like once a month I need to do it. Like every single day you need to come before Jesus and say, am I missing it? Yeah. And show me, Jesus. Because really the question isn't so much, am I missing it? We are. Where? Yeah. Where am I missing? The
chances of us missing it are very
high. Are 100%. Where am I missing in my life what I need to be displaying to become more like Christ?
Yeah. And that's a dangerous prayer to pray, because he'll show you.
He will, and it's painful.
It is.
It's very, very sad and painful if you're willing. But I think that's the best question to ask, and it's the best attitude to have, is you're really searching and seeking in that, and that God will show you. God will show you exactly where you're missing it, and that's painfully tough. But it's necessary for us to grow to be more like Christ, which is the goal of all things. Yeah. And so we kind of end with that, and that was a good little journey through Luke chapter 15, right? Isn't 15. That where we found that? Luke 15.
11 through 32.
Yeah, I don't want to assume that you would know that story. Go read all three of the parables, because they all have the same bent of them about lostness, and that lost things matter to God. And so I want you to hold that in your heart and in your mind as we kind of exit stage right today. I guess I'm not really sure how we exit on the camera.
Just
but
walk.
we actually it just goes and goes like we fade out.
Yeah, we do.
We don't really
fade
exit.
out. We just disappear.
As we fade out today, that's a great question. Where am I missing it, and where do I need to be more like Jesus in my life? And that's scary, and that's dangerous, and sometimes messy, but it's necessary for to do that. And so we thank you for tuning in again today to hear from us, and more importantly, to hear from God and His Word. And we hope that it's helped you to grow in your faith. Until we see you next time, see ya.
See you guys.